Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, talking portal today, Landis. We've been waiting on this, waiting for it to settle. April 30th was the last day for guys to go in to file the paperwork. It maybe takes a day or two for maybe the last few things to trickle out. Guys can still make decisions about where they're going, but we're done hearing about guys in the portal. Is that right? Or could there be something a fax machine broke and maybe something still happens?
No, I would imagine we're mostly done. I think it's like the schools have 48 hours after a player informs them to actually process the paperwork, but we're basically up against that already. I believe grad transfers had an extra day. So maybe something like that could pop after people watch this or listen to this, but I think we're mostly done.
Yeah, which is why we waited, because it's hard to analyze it on the fly, and especially in a world where there are guys transferring who transferred to a new school in January, went through spring ball, and now are transferring again. We had that happen, and we're not even going to talk about Caden Proctor going from Alabama to Iowa back to Alabama, because that's such old news. Everybody already knows that. I mean, if we were ranking overall portal moves in the last 2 months for the North, that would be really high, but we know that. But there's another situation that worked for the North where a guy left, went to a new school for spring ball, and now is going back to the original school. That is on our list. We're going to run through 10 kind of topics. It's not necessarily a rank. It's not necessarily the 10 biggest, but it's 10 things that we wanted to talk about as it relates to Northern football in the spring portal. But I want to first give you a couple names of guys who transferred in this window a year ago to talk about how, it's certainly not, if you put a percent on it right now, the spring portal is what percent as interesting, important, whatever, compared to the transfers that we see in December?
It's pretty low. I don't know, 20.
Yeah.
It's not
10.
Yeah, 10. I could probably be talked into lower than 10, which is interesting to me because I felt like as spring practices were starting to wrap up and this window was approaching, people were like, "Oh, strap in, baby. This is going to be wild." And then it wasn't. It really wasn't. So I don't know if that's just going to be the way of it moving forward. I don't know. I think it still makes more sense probably to transfer before spring ball than after spring ball. But I felt like there were a lot of people very concerned about what this spring portal window might look like. And by and large, I thought it was I don't know, kind of slow.
Yeah. The thing that you wait for is there a player who was thinking about leaving and decided, I'm going to stay and hang in for the spring football battle? And then if I'm not in a position to start or play a lot, or if I'm not on the path that I think I should be on here, then I'm going to leave. And so that's where the ho, 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 ho. And that especially can apply to quarterbacks sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Dwayne Haskins and Joe Burrow in 2018. It's all right, the winner's going to start and the guy who doesn't win is going to leave. And we saw what happened. So we were at least on alert for that. And that kind of really didn't happen, maybe with one exception that we are going to talk about early on. But I want to throw some names out here. These are some guys who did move in the spring window last year. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Keon Coleman from Michigan State to Florida State. That was huge, right? Receiver?
Yeah, I would say so. One of the bigger portal moves in all of last year's cycle. Yeah.
Because I can remember watching the Florida State spring game last year. I came away from the Florida State spring game thinking these guys they were my national title pick based on their spring game. And it was Johnny Wilson. They had a guy named Kenyon Portier or something like that, a young, big receiver who had a great game. And then it was and then they added Keon Coleman. I was oh my, Trey Benson, Jordan Travis, all those guys. So that was a big one. Josh Simmons, Ohio State added a guy from San Diego State who became their starting left tackle after Ohio State last spring went through a search for a left tackle battle and found no one. That was huge, right?
It was huge. Yeah. They would have been in a pretty terrible position had they not been able to find him.
A year ago, Michigan was saying, we know we have one good corner. We're not sure who our number 2 corner is. And they got Josh Wallace from UMass, who was awesome, had a great last year at Michigan and helped them win the national title. Gigantic move, right? Filled a need.
Definitely.
Cincinnati's leading receiver last year was Xavier Henderson. They got him from Florida in the spring window. You're amazed by that. Yeah. Yeah. How about that?
Actually, I had forgotten that he would transferred at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, in the spring window.
RJ Moten, who had been a starting safety at Michigan, transferred away from Michigan in the last spring window. Bear Alexander, not a Northern thing, but went from Georgia to USC after the spring window. Defensive tackle last year. Alton McCaskill was a huge deal at the time. 1,000-yard rusher at Houston, transferred to Colorado in the spring window. So like that, like there are things that can happen. And I'm just wondering, do we have an equivalent, especially in the North, this spring of Michigan adding a guy who is a starting cornerback for a great defense, Ohio State adding a starting left tackle, Cincinnati adding a leading receiver, Michigan State losing a guy who wound up being a second-round pick in the NFL draft. I don't know that there's a single move that rises to the level of any of those maybe big four from a year ago.
No, I don't think so. We're going to talk about Colorado kind of reshaping its running back room. Like maybe there's something there with the two guys they added, but aside from that, like at least like we're going to run through some additions here and some losses as well. But I don't know that any of the ones we're going to talk about quite rise to that level. But then again, like you probably would have said like Keon Coleman at the time, like that was a huge deal, like that. But like I don't know if he would have said like Josh Wallace is going to like be a slam dunk for Michigan, right? So there are probably some that have happened that we don't think of that way now, but you know, a year from now we could be listing a couple of these moves when we have this conversation again.
And again, we think we know the guys who are in now. They all haven't made decisions. So, I mean, there's a couple guys floating around out there, but like, I don't know that there's a guy, for instance, Ohio State, if Ohio State still wanted to add a tackle or a guard, is there somebody like an uncommitted guy that we know is in the portal that you'd be like, oh, well, if he goes to Ohio State, he all of a sudden has a chance to start? Like, is that?
I haven't seen it. No, I've been paying pretty close attention to it to see. And I haven't seen that guy. There's a guy from UCLA who is like their starting left tackle, who obviously has ties to Chip Kelly and Justin Fry, Ohio State's offensive line coach, who was formerly at UCLA as well, but he's not a very good player. So like he wouldn't be like an upgrade to start at a place like Ohio State.
Whereas we did think going into spring that was a possibility. Well, let's see how it goes for Ohio State on the offensive line in spring, and then we'll see what shakes out in the portal. And it feels like nothing shook. Quarterbacks is where also like you think, okay, is there a battle? Is there a guy who's not going to be the starter? Does that open something up? Or is there even a guy who thinks he's going to start here, but it becomes very clear that a more established program with the higher upside also needs a quarterback in there? Woohoo! They're giving the Nick Saban woohoo over here. and it doesn't feel like, maybe with one exception, that it happened a ton. So the big one was Jaden Rashada going from Arizona State to Georgia, the guy who what did Florida do? Florida gave him $10 million. And then they said, we had crossed fingers behind our back. You don't actually get it. I think.
Yeah. Something like the direct deposit didn't hit or something.
Direct deposit. Yeah. Like it's like a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. That would be a great, if Curb is not over, Larry David comes back as the head of an NIL collective. The deposit didn't hit. It didn't hit. It didn't. And then there's like 19-year-old football players coming over and knocking on his door. Like, where's my $600,000? Jaden. I can't believe it. So he then went from Florida to Arizona State. Now he's going to Georgia. Georgia just is scrambling for quarterbacks. Georgia's like, how do we get quarterbacks? We'll take a guy on his third school and we'll recruit guys in Ohio. So just remember where Georgia is right now in quarterbacks. Nick Evers, one-time Oklahoma transfer, went to Wisconsin, is not going to be the guy as Wisconsin went in. We thought, okay, this could be interesting. He's going to UConn. So I don't know if Bobby Hurley had something to do with that, but that's not a huge move. Christian Veilleux, Penn State to Pitt. He is a guy who wound up third in the Pitt pecking order quarterback. He goes in the portal, going to Georgia State. Not super impactful for the playoff, right?
No.
Colin Schlee left UCLA. He landed at Virginia Tech. I mean, this is like what we're talking about in a world where we thought it at least possible that Michigan would come out of spring ball saying, we're open for business at quarterback. Maybe Iowa. We talked about Iowa. Certainly, it felt like the people who cover Iowa with Caden Ackmeyer's injury, assuming he'll be back from injury, but Deacon Hill, the presumed backup, leaves. Are they going to add somebody? They still could add that. Brendan Sullivan, the Northwestern starting quarterback, transferred. Actually, Northwestern doesn't have a quarterback right now either, because Northwestern thought it was going to be Brendan Sullivan. He's leaving. It's like he sort of left in a way that made you think, okay, Northwestern has a plan. I think people thought maybe they were going to get the South Dakota State quarterback, because they now have the South Dakota State offensive coordinator, and the South Dakota State quarterback went on social media and said, I'm going back to South Dakota State, which was like, okay, whatever, but also was kind of a big deal. Yeah. So Michigan's rolling with what they got at quarterback. Iowa has every finger in the state crossed for the healthy return of Cade McNamara. Northwestern is pretty up in the air at quarterback. Those are just a couple examples, but it doesn't feel like there are solutions in the portal necessarily for all those answers. Although, get back to me. We're going to get to our number one topic here in a second. Gavin Wimsatt to Northwestern in 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, let's have that conversation. I guess because like he's the guy, right? If survey the landscape of who's available, who excites you the most. It's got and Gavin Wimsatt has his flaws for sure, but like he's I think by far the guy that excites you the most.
Gavin Wimsatt to Michigan in 3, 2. Gavin Wimsatt leading Iowa into a playoff quarterfinal in 3, 2. Okay, so let's get to our 10 that we want to talk about. In number 1 is the Rutgers quarterback battle that fulfilled everything we're talking about here, except this is not the one we wanted to fulfill it, because we just did the spring game wrap and we were like 2 quarterback system at Rutgers. And no, Greg Schiano names Ethan Kaliakmanis the starter. Gavin Wimsatt goes in the portal. I guess this is Greg Schiano doing right by his quarterbacks, but also, I don't know, doing right by the program might have been stringing them along and playing 2 this fall.
Yeah, I would have been in favor of the latter. I think I was very excited about the potential 2 quarterback system, man. And now we're not going to have it. And now like Rutgers has Ethan Kaliakmanis, and now like their backup is a true freshman, I think. So that's not a great situation for Rutgers to be in. But like I suppose it is good of Greg Schiano to do right by his quarterbacks, and it's good for Gavin Wimsatt to have an opportunity to go find a place where he could potentially start. But man, it would have been really fun to see that those 2 guys work together with that offense.
It's hard because I still think of like, Gavin Wimsatt, he's a young guy. He's been in college for 3 years because he early enrolled. Yeah. We called him the Quinn Ewers of New Jersey when it happened, because he early enrolled, like not in the spring, but in the fall of 2021, the same time that Quinn Ewers was at Ohio State. It was like, wow, look at this. And then, of course, it didn't work out for Quinn Ewers at Ohio State. He goes to Texas. Gavin Wimsatt, they tried it. It kind of worked, but you wind up in a world. His career at Rutgers, 14 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, a lower than 50% completion rate. But let me give you this. Power 5 starting quarterbacks last year, according to PFF, like about 50 of them that threw at least like 50% of their team's passes. Do you want to know where Gavin Wimsatt ranked in ADOT, average depth of target, among all Power 5 quarterbacks?
Please tell me.
4th.
Oh, good for him.
Garrett Green, Jalen Milroe, DJ Uiagalelei, and the Rutgers guy, which is so. And we talk about ADOT, average depth of target, with Bo Nix, right? And how short it was. If they would have run a Bo Nix offense for Gavin Wimsatt, we might be in a different world, because guess what? Ethan Kaliakmanis at Minnesota last year, 8th. I think Rutgers wants to throw it down the field. So rather than adjusting their offense to let Gavin Wimsatt dink and dunk and then run, they were like, keep trying. His adjusted completion percentage was the worst in the Power 5. And they were like, keep trying. So instead of adjusting their offense to Gavin Wimsatt, they just brought in a guy that they think can throw down the field, so that they stuck with who they want to be rather than adjusting to their QB. And then I guess once he got there, I guess it was always going to be Ethan Kaliakmanis. But now I'm very hopeful about Gavin Wimsatt landing somewhere where we maybe still have a chance to see the best of him. And I hope it's in the North.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, Northwestern, I think, would make sense. I don't know, like Michigan, you already have Alex Orji, who's like basically Gavin Wimsatt. Wimsatt.
Can
leaving
Gavin
it.
Wimsatt lead Michigan to back-to-back national titles? Let's get out in front on this.
I think if Michigan is in the market to improve its passing ability, I don't think Gavin Wimsatt and his 27% completion rate on deep throws is the guy you want to bring in necessarily. But like Northwestern, just like snap him the ball and let him be the offense. Yeah, sign me up for that.
Can we do that? I'm David Braun's got to be on the phone, right? Come on.
I hope so. Yeah.
And there's not a ton of jobs open. So I hope
he's from Kentucky. He's from Kentucky, and neither Kentucky nor Louisville, I think, are in the market for a starting quarterback. Yeah. Kentucky has Brock Vandegrift, and Louisville has Tyler Shuck, who's still in college football.
Yeah, Tyler Shuck in year 9. Okay, so we are understanding, but a little disappointed about this. But I guess to be fair, Greg Schiano did right by his guys, and Gavin Wimsatt's not getting any younger, and he wants to go start.
Yeah. Which is like, I get it. But
all right,
man, what could have been for the Rutgers offense? I know. You said they were going to win 9 games on Twitter.
I know. Now they're only going to win 8. I still do like because I did have a mistake in the show last week. I said that Rutgers is not playing Penn State, Michigan, or Ohio State, but they do have to play Oregon, and they're not playing Oregon. They're playing, I guess, Washington and USC. I think Washington, USC, and UCLA, but they're not playing Oregon. They might win 10. What are we talking about? They're fine. They're going to win every game. Kyle Monunga is gonna have like 26 carries for 111 yards in every game. The defense is going to be on the field for 80 snaps every game. And Ethan Kaliak-Manis will hit enough third down throws to Nassim Brantley that Greg Schiano is going to win a bunch of 2017 games, and Rutgers will have a good year. We don't. Gavin Wimsatt, his departure doesn't like completely change that equation, right?
No, I don't think so. I mean, but I don't know. I guess probably not for them, right? I truly, if they had designs on like building this offense around like a 2 quarterback idea, I don't think Greg Schiano would have done this, right? So clearly our visions for the Rutgers offense are not necessarily what was in the minds of the coaches at Piscataway.
No, that'll be good. I really do want to get we want to have coaches on. I'd love to have Greg Schiano on and be like, dude, what happened? We had a whole plan for you. Did you not watch? Were you not watching? All right. Number 2 is Minnesota. We're talking about Minnesota that lost Ethan Kaliak-Manis because they brought in Max Brosmer from New Hampshire as their starting quarterback, but they're adding some guys in this spring window. They maybe added potentially the most maybe impactful guys in the spring portal in the North. Tyler Williams, a receiver from Georgia, who I think was only at Georgia for a year, but it's like, I am on board. Dog mentality. This one I actually mean. The North should get Georgia backups, right? I was is it Nyland Green that Purdue got like a Georgia backup corner? AJ Harris, right? At Penn State. Mm-hmm. Get Georgia backups. Dog mentality. Always messes up. Oh my God, I can't. Can I get the stylist in here? My wife's going to be like, were you yelling at me to be the stylist? And then it's the mirror image. So I always am brushing the wrong side of my head, right? It's like, wait, what part of my head am I brushing? Tyler Williams, like that's a great plan for a place like Minnesota. Right? It doesn't have to be the plan for Penn State got one, but like Ohio State got a couple of Alabama guys. Maybe it's a good plan for everybody in the North. Like the South can cram it, but their backups are welcome.
Yeah. I think places like Ohio State should take Georgia starters.
Yeah, I agree. Right. So, but this is a good plan. Like the fact that Brock Vandegrift, as you talked about, went to Kentucky, like that would have been a great get for the North, right? Georgia's number 2. Like he's never going to play. Carson Beck beat him out. So that was a big deal. Adam Kisai from Clemson, a defensive end, who's originally from Florida, was like a pretty big recruit. They got him. And the big one, this is huge. This is exactly how this should work. Jackson Howard, who was the number 1 player in the state of Minnesota a year ago. He went to LSU, and now he's back at Minnesota. And that is a great job by Minnesota. It would be great if Minnesota can just get the number 1 player in its state out of high school. But if you can't, you planted seeds, you developed relationships, you probably had your position recruiter at his high school 14 times. And so the moment it doesn't work at the big time school that he went to, that frankly, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. You're ready for round 2. I think that's a great job by Minnesota. And I think Jackson Howard's going to play for them this year.
I would imagine he's going to play a lot for them, right? He's a former top 100 guy. Like he didn't play it all last year. So like he's basically a freshman, but that's like a really high profile recruit that typically Minnesota doesn't get. So I'd imagine he's going to play a ton, if not start for them.
They got a third quarterback from Virginia Tech because they kind of were looking to add a guy because they have the young, I can't remember, they have the young freshman that they like for the future. They have Max Brosmer for now, but I like getting a third quarterback. They got a UTEP offensive tackle who has a chance, who's a monster, who has a chance to work in, just like a really big guy on their offensive line. Like I like a coach like PJ Fleck being aggressive in the spring portal. And so I think there's quantity here, but I also think there's some quality here. And we may look back and say there are 3 or 4 guys that are helping Minnesota in the fall that just got here in April and May.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I like the swings, and the guy from Clemson you mentioned. I think is it Kisai or Kisai, whatever it is.
I think Kisai. I did look up. We spend a lot of time in the pronunciation guides online.
I didn't. We do, but I actually did not for him, so I apologize.
I did for him. Kiss, Kiss, capital letter, dash, EYE, small letter. Kiss I. That's how I got it.
Former Minnesota commit.
I didn't realize that.
Flipped to Clemson, spent spring ball at Clemson, and then was like, I'll go back to Minnesota. So
great job.
Yeah.
Great job by Minnesota.
Yeah. It would have been nice to have him in spring ball yourself, but like, yeah, it's a good job. Way to stay on it.
But you get more credit this way.
Yeah, you do get more credit this way. I think Minnesota, I was looking through some stuff from last year. Minnesota like needs some good transfer vibes, I think. They had Beanie Bishop, who left them to go to West Virginia last year. And they also had Austin Booker, who left them to go to Kansas and like was an animal at Kansas and it became like a 5th round draft pick as a defensive tackle. It's like, but Minnesota would have liked to have him. Like he didn't play at Minnesota. He hardly played at Minnesota and then played for 1 year at Kansas and became a 5th round pick. It's like, oh, I bet that stings. So hopefully 1 or 2 or 3 of these guys can work out for the Gophers to get some of that luck going back their way.
Yeah, it's a program like that. We gave, I think Purdue was aggressive in the first portal window. That was a big thing for them in the spring. They have a bunch of guys like that. And now Minnesota is really being aggressive in the spring portal window. So I think it's a good strategy. Take your shot and be ready to pounce. And the guy from Clemson, the guy from LSU were 2 great examples. All right, let's talk about Washington. Something Washington yet to have its spring game. It's Friday night under the lights. Everybody in the NFL is going to be there. I like Jed Fish trying to grab onto a vibe, but this was a really interesting thing because they have Will Rogers from Mississippi State, who's going to be the starter this year as a transfer. He transferred, committed to Kalen DeBoer and that staff leaves. He goes in the portal. Jed Fish and the new staff from Arizona, they're able to persuade him to stay. He stays. He's going to be the starter. But Demarcus Davis was the guy that Kalen DeBoer had recruited there to be the next quarterback. He comes. He also goes in the portal after the coaching change. Jed Fish and those guys persuade him to stay. He stays for spring ball. But Desmond Williams Jr., who had been committed to Arizona with Jed Fish, I think it actually had been at Arizona, then comes with Jed Fish to Washington. And so what we have in spring practice is Will Rogers is almost certainly going to be the starter, but Demarcus Davis and Desmond Williams Jr. are battling to be next up for the future of Washington football starting in 2025. And Jed Fish's guy, Desmond Williams Jr., from all the reports, it's not like we're there, but all the reports, really impressive. He's a smaller guy. He's about 5'11". Demarcus Davis is like 6'5". Impressive, throwing deep balls, moving, kind of clearly the number 2, and Demarcus Davis goes in the portal. So we talked about this, for instance, with Julian Sayin and Aaron Noland at Ohio State. There's a starting quarterback battle, but there's the beginning. Spring practice is the beginning of the battle for who's up next. And at a place like Washington, this is super important, especially because Austin Mack, who had been like the other next guy up at Washington, went with Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. Like this is their pipeline. It was Davis or Williams, and it's been settled. And so Demarcus Davis becomes an interesting option. I don't think as a starter in 2024, but this is a pretty talented quarterback that'll be out there for somebody. But Desmond Williams, I think, is turning heads.
It'll be interesting to see what happens there because like they did a lot. I think they convinced Will Rogers to stay, right? But
Yeah.
I, it's an interesting question, I think, for Jed Fish in Washington. It's like clearly you're rebuilding, right? I think expectations are pretty low. What is better for you to like start building this thing around Damon Williams now, or like try to salvage a bowl season by playing the guy who is, more mature and has played a lot of college football, and Will Rogers? Like I don't know the right answer necessarily. I do know that, like, in terms of quarterback style, Williams seems very similar to Noah Fafita, who Jed Fish had at Washington, and Will Rogers is decidedly not. So I'm just like, I got an eye toward Seattle to see, like, maybe this freshman might take the job at some point.
I'm an idiot. I was calling him Desmond. It's Demond, obviously. Yeah. I apologize.
Sure.
So that's interesting. And like that matters. It might be the thing that mattered the most in Washington spring football. I'm eager to see their spring game. But them sort of settling this, and we sort of talked about, I think Jed Fish, right, would have loved for Noah Fafita to follow him to Washington, maybe a receiver or two to follow him from Washington. Like the whole team didn't follow him, but that Damon Williams Jr. did, it turns out might be a pretty big deal.
Potentially a huge deal. Yeah. Because even if he doesn't play, he's going to play this year, right? Because he's a worse than number 2 quarterback. But even if he doesn't ever take that starting job, like, this is an important year for him to get ready to be like the guy who's going to be Washington's starting quarterback for the next 2 or 3 years. So
yeah,
it's a huge deal. Yeah.
So huge deal. All right. Next up, you mentioned it earlier, the Colorado running back room, and they basically tore it down and built it back up. And is it better? What do you think?
I kind of think so. It's interesting to me. Like, I should have looked this up before we started talking. Like, they went from like a smallish running back room to like now a pretty big, like, Dallin Hayden from Ohio State is not a huge running back league. He's got good size for a running back. And then the guy they added from Miami, Ohio, is Rashad Amos. Yeah. Huge. 6'2", 234 pounds. Like, he is a big, big running back. And I think Colorado needs that because I know they revamped their offensive line, but we still don't know how good that offensive line is going to be. You're going to need some backs who can, like, find a hole, which is what Dallin Hayden's really good at. Dallin Hayden has incredible vision. Or break through tackles because guys are getting through your offensive line, which seems to be what Rashad Amos is pretty good at. So, like, I like Dylan Edwards. I like Dalton McCaskill. I was like kind of surprised that Dalton McCaskill didn't work out at Colorado because he was excellent at Houston, as you said earlier. But this feels like an upgrade to lose those two and gain Hayden and Amos. I think is better off for Colorado. Yeah.
And they flipped, I guess we call them flips in the transfer portal. They flipped Amos from Mississippi State. So he's coming from Miami of Ohio. I think he was like 3rd in the MAC in rushing last year, but they also pulled him away from an SEC team that wanted him.
Colorado's by the way, on the topic of Miami, Ohio, just quickly, like, because many shows ago, I was very excited about Miami, Ohio, like keeping all of its guys and gearing up to go win the MAC and try to get the G5 playoff spot.
I remember that.
They all left.
No, for real?
Not all of them, but a few of those guys who said they were staying absolutely left. Yeah.
There's such a brotherhood, like right after the bowl game, or like between the end of the regular season and the bowl game. It's like, we're back for this. And then it's, do you want a condo?
Yeah.
With a hot tub? It's like, oh man, brotherhood, condo, hot tub. I don't know.
It's tough.
I've never lived in a condo. I have lived in a condo with a bathtub with like jacuzzi jets, but that's not the same thing as a hot tub, is it?
Oh, but that's nice though. That was like your like your home bathtub had jacuzzi jets in it.
Yeah, just by accident.
That's classy. Yeah,
that would be another one. Larry, you said it was going to be a jacuzzi. It's got jets. Larry, it's not a hot tub. It's got the jets. The jets are the hot tub. Colorado is not making a lot of friends. We talked the other day, like after the Colorado spring game, let's remember where this program was and where it is now. There's certainly more sizzle, even if all the substance isn't there yet. But then they're being mean. And we were discussing the strategy of this, of if you want to be jerks to people, okay. But then when they say, you were mean to me, then you don't have to say get bent to the person you already were mean to, was that a correct characterization of what transpired on social media? Max Olson from The Athletic did this really interesting story, right, where he talked to all the guys who left Colorado last year. And I think there was maybe one guy that stood out that was like, it really was hard for me. And Deion never really got to know me, and I really felt bad about the situation. And like somebody put that quote out there, and the Sanders family was like, "You suck."
Yeah, Shador Sanders said, like, "I don't remember you. You must have been a mid player or something like that." Like, come on, man.
Is that necessary?
I don't think you had to do that.
It's hard. Like, I feel like I'm like trying to lead the backlash to the backlash. Like everybody was too excited about Colorado, me included. And everybody, I think, was too down on Colorado because it still, again, was such an increase, a better program, better for the fans. And we're a show for the fans first and foremost. like just what did you say? Put the phone down.
Yeah. The number one rule of Twitter is never tweet. And they should adhere to that rule.
Yeah. And it's just like, do your thing. We know you already said the thing. You said the guy was cheap luggage. And so we know, but then don't double down on that when the guy says, I didn't like to be called cheap luggage.
Yeah. And don't pound your chest either if you're Deion and say like Shador's going to be a top 5 pick, because like you don't know that.
No, I know.
And honestly, he probably won't be.
But I like Shador. Like, I think Shador Sanders is a good quarterback. Like, I think he might not be the best quarterback in the North, but like, let's just not let all the other stuff like. And there's a difference between I think our old friend Matt Brown made this point on Twitter, like punching down, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm the guy who sort of had my life upended because Deion Sanders came into Colorado and sort of said, "Get out of here." That's a tough situation. You don't have to punch down on that guy after you already told him to leave the program. Like, just let him be. Yeah. So that's all. I mean, like, I don't pound your chest about your program, about how good you're going to be. You know, if you're complaining about the haters or the doubters, that's fine. But like, it's just a guy, it's just a kid who was sad, right? It was in a tough spot. And it's like, that's the hard thing about this. And it is different when media people are idiots, current company included. We say ridiculous stuff all the times, and we are very capable of forgetting that these are human beings, and especially in college sports, young human beings who are in a transformative, transitional, often difficult, strange, new time in their lives. And most of them are just doing the best they can. And we can forget that. And I get upset when we forget that. But you know who shouldn't forget that? Coaches and players. The people who are living it, who see those people as human beings every day. The media, we're stupid. We're cruel. We're dismissive. We're glib. I have been so glib about human feelings over the course of my life. I'm an idiot. Sports time. Let's have some sports talk and pretend that people aren't real. You're a coach and a teammate, man. That's what gets me upset. I think they should be held to a higher standard because they're in the thick of the battle with these people. And of course, there's mid players all over the place, but you don't have to like call out a guy on Twitter.
Yeah, and I also get like, you know, Deion Sanders is far from the first coach to run off a bunch of guys from his team, right? So like, I get and like and to in Colorado's defense, like when that happens, there aren't usually exposés about it, or very rarely does it happen. So like, if Colorado felt targeted for some reason, I'd almost understand that, and I also understand like Shador wanting to defend his dad. He probably could have just done it differently. rather than like further insulting the player.
Yeah. So it's just like, I want to be excited about Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter and the rebuilt running back room and the rebuilt offensive line and 4 pass catchers that seem like real guys and maybe an offensive game plan that's a little bit better and a new defensive coordinator hire and Robert Livingston that we liked. Like, I want to be excited about Colorado football. I get excited when Deion has on his cowboy hat, gets on the mic at the spring game, all that stuff. But it's just like, I don't like this. I don't like this. And I think the average fan is like, come on, like it's not necessary. Okay. Actually, let's take a quick break. When we come back, We're going to get into some more things. Michigan State's on the horizon, Syracuse, Michigan, a couple more teams to talk about in regards to the transfer portal. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis back on Kings of the North. If you want to give us a thumbs up on YouTube, the thumbs help, right, Landis? Thumbs are good for us.
Love a thumbs up.
Love the thumbs. If you want to drop a review on Apple Podcasts, we certainly would take that and appreciate that. And we're not going to tell you to make it positive. If you think we stink, we'll take constructive criticism, right? I mean, like if Deion Sanders wants to drop in and be like, these guys don't know. It's like, Deion, come on. We're just doing the best we can. Don't punch down. Don't punch down. At this point, Deion would still be punching down on Kings of the North. But once we're a conglomerate, you know what I've been looking at? And now, again, you click one thing in Instagram, you get 100 of them. One is customized letter jackets for us to get KOTN letter jackets, and the other is a neon sign to hang behind us. And now I'm just deluged with letter jackets and neon sign things, but they all seem like reasonably priced and a pretty quick turnaround. So you and I might be wearing KOTN leather jackets like in a week.
I've been in the room where we're setting up your studio, and it can get a little warm, so we'll see about that.
Tripping. I love this. I love this leather jacket, but need to consume 400 ounces of water during the show. All right, next up, this is our fifth topic that we need to talk about in regards to the Northern portal. Michigan State. And Michigan State, Jonathan Smith, new coach, a lot of turnover. They are experiencing a lot of turnover. They had some before. They're having more in the spring. And one of the things that happened is brothers left. And like, you love brothers sticking together. But the Mangum brothers, and you're going to have to correct me again if I say the wrong names with my eyeballs. Is it Jaron, the running back, and Jaden, the safety? I believe is correct. Jaden was a starting safety last year. Jaron, I think, was at two different schools before he went to Michigan State. Jaden's a real loss, and I think they have 6 DBs in the portal from Michigan State now, from the once no-fly zone at Michigan State. So this is a loss, I think, to lose a starting safety in the spring. It's not like a panic meter, right? It's just, this is the fallout probably still of a coaching change, but maybe you thought the fallout was mostly done after the initial hire, and it turns out some guys hung on through spring ball and having some fallout. And again, it may be one of these where it's like a mutual parting. It may be the coaches are suggesting it. It may be the coaches wanting to stay and the players are leaving. We don't know, but there's still a lot of movement with Michigan State. There is, and I think arguably Michigan State probably needed to lose some guys from its secondary, because it's been frankly quite bad for a number of years. It has been a bad secondary and a bad passing defense. Now, I think you don't want to lose starters necessarily, and like there were some younger starters who were sticking around, and I think people were excited about the trajectory they were on. So like, it's not like they had to get rid of everybody, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if Michigan State is kind of remaking its secondary. But now when you lose as many as they lost, you start to ask questions about, like, do you even have like enough depth, enough guys to get through a season? So that becomes a little precarious. But yeah, I think it's mostly just normal fallout from a coaching change, and you don't like for it to happen now. Like you said, you prefer that it all happens like immediately after the coaching change happens. But again, I think it also makes sense for players to kind of see what spring's like, see what the vibes are like in practice. Do you like this? Do you think you fit in the scheme, kind of thing? And then if you feel like you don't, then you leave afterward. Jalen Berger, running back, went in the portal too. We maybe after the spring game, we're like, oh, maybe they have like two-headed running back. Like there's just a lot of movement there still. And we'll go to our next topic, which is we want to talk about some of the big defensive linemen who are moving around in the North, and a lot of them are Michigan State guys. And Derek Harmon might be the biggest prize left in the portal as we speak. A guy who was in the portal in the winter, correct? Came back to Michigan State and now is definitely out in the portal and might wind up staying North in an impactful way. There's some other defensive linemen, but this is a big get, right? Wherever he lands. Yes. And actually, as we're having this conversation, I'm seeing Steve Wiltfong at On3 saying that like a potential return to Michigan State is like on the table. Also has Colorado, Oregon, USC, and Ohio State, which is interesting among the teams going after him. But like, he visit Ohio State.
Maybe the first time
window?
around. Yeah, I think the first time around. Yeah, the first time around he did. Yeah. Not recently, I don't believe, but probably the biggest prize, as you said. Like if there were, I think there were probably two guys on Michigan's defense that like seemed like they were definitely going to be going off to the NFL eventually, and Harmon is one of them, and I think Simeon Barrow is the other one, and are losing both of them most likely.
Yes.
So you don't want to be losing starting caliber defensive linemen. And it does seem like too in this spring portal window that defensive tackle is like the position du jour. Like everyone's looking for defensive tackle help, which is good for defensive tackles because they seem to be getting paid a lot of money if they're willing to move.
Simeon Barrow Jr. seems like maybe Miami or LSU for him, which is again is like, okay, well, if you're going to leave, stay in the North. It feels like it's not going to happen. They lost a younger guy too. Is it Andy DePepe? I'm going to say that wrong, but like I think a decently high recruit on that defensive line. I think they have 4 defensive linemen from Michigan State who are among like sort of the 4 interesting Northern guys in the portal at that spot. So if they could get Harmon back, that would be a huge deal. I mean, it's just
seems unlikely.
They got to fix this. Like, this is just like, oh, I transferred, but I transferred back, but I transferred, but I didn't transfer, but I did. It's like, do you have a contract or not? So and again, there's discussion about this, right? I mean, we are not going headfirst into that discussion on this show because we like to talk about football, not lawsuits and legal issues and contracts, but we understand how it affects the future of the sport. There's reporting out there that like, yes, we're going to get there. There's like another step coming. Is the NCAA going to try to settle something before a lawsuit is decided that would lead us towards in-house NIL? That would lead us to players signing contracts. There was a report that would lead us to, like, for instance, you've got to play in bowl games. You've got to play in playoff games. You can't opt out as part of your contracts. We would think we would get to the point where if you are going to go in the portal, you can't go in the portal, come out of the portal, go for spring practice, come back after spring practice. Like there's just some nonsense here that is really not player freedom. It's player chaos. And I don't think it benefits players, right? So you should have some choice, but you shouldn't have unlimited choice. And we understand this, but there's, even as we speak, it's like the portal's like closed and we're like, okay, there's still this huge guy out there who could go to 4 different Northern schools or still maybe go back. And it's the second time of dancing in the portal. And it's nothing against Derek Harmon because he's just playing by the current rules, but doesn't it make you say to yourself, what are we doing?
Yeah, I just think I think structure would benefit everybody. And I don't mean to come off as like saying like none of these players are mature enough to like make the right decisions for themselves, because I think a lot of them are. But like you said earlier, we're still dealing with young people who, you know, at times probably aren't being guided by the people with the best intentions, right? So I think more structure would be beneficial for everybody. But at the moment, we don't really have any. So stuff like this happens.
Yeah. Another guy, so Jackson Howard, right, would be on this list of defensive linemen, as we already talked about, going from LSU to Minnesota. That's a big deal. Dan Hayes happened early, but happened like right after the Pitt spring game. We were like, hey, Dan Hayes, great Pitt spring game. We think that, he's going to Colorado. But that's, again, you know, when we get back to the substance conversation around Colorado, we don't want to forget that that's a moderately huge addition, right?
Big time. Colorado needs to get better up front on both sides of the ball. Like they didn't look like a Power 5 team on either of their lines last year, so they're getting closer to that now. And
the last defensive lineman I want to talk about in the North is CJ West, Mac guy from Kent State, who it seems like has offers from almost everybody, including a lot of Big Ten teams. I think Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, among the teams that have a shot at him. And this is the kind of thing that happens. Like, is there a type of transfer that, generally speaking, you are more interested in? Are you more interested in a guy moving up, like a successful player moving up from a smaller conference, or are you more interested in a backup player coming down from a power? So are you generally more interested in a MAC high-level starter or a Georgia backup when it comes to the portal?
I am more interested in like a guy who demonstrates an ability to like be the best at his position at his level. So like give me a first team all conference player from a G5 team over like a former highly rated recruit who couldn't get on the field at a power program.
So then you are interested in where CJ West winds up?
I am. Yeah, very much so. Yeah. And like you said, there's a couple teams in the North that could use defensive line help. It does. I don't like this. I don't like the trend. I don't like seeing these guys go to the Miamis and the LSUs of the world. So hopefully that doesn't happen here.
I mean, this is, if we did a show of top 10 things the North must do in the portal, building a wall around the MAC would be high on the list, which is why I hated DeQuan Finn, the Toledo quarterback, going to Baylor. Why is DeQuan Finn, the Toledo quarterback, not the Northwestern quarterback? Like that's the kind of thing that we're talking
Graham
about.
Nicholson from Miami, Ohio, the Lou Groza winner, went to Alabama. Yeah.
Terrible. When people thought maybe like Ohio State would be interested, no?
Ohio State, I think, was interested, but they didn't get him. Yeah.
Yeah. What's up, man? What's happening?
Do you know where CJ West went to high school?
I don't.
Same high school as JJ McCarthy. So, which I think means they were teammates at one point.
The high school in Illinois, not IMG.
No, high school in Illinois, not IMG.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, then maybe he's going to wind up at Michigan.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's keep him. There's one thing to not get Southern players to come north. You did the best you can. You got to keep Northern players north.
Yeah.
Because there's a misperception. You've got to, and we will gladly help with this. You must punch through the misperception that the South is a step up. That is maybe why we exist. More than anything. That generally speaking, hey, if I can go to LSU or Miami, that's the best I can do. No, it's not. Why is that better than Michigan or Penn State or Ohio State or having a great opportunity to play a bunch of snaps at Minnesota or Purdue? We have, especially for a Northern kid, we must dispense with that notion. And I think do you think it still exists to some degree for some people?
I wonder, I think, yes, it exists. I think it exists. I think it is less prevalent, that thought, now, but the other issue is that a lot of the teams in the South are willing to overpay.
Yeah, I know. I know. Does that the South ruins everything. Can we just say that? The South ruins everything. They ruin coaching contracts because the North thinks, well, I don't know, should college football head coaches make $17 million a year? And then their agents go, well, that's what Tennessee pays. It's like, okay. And now we're having that in NIL. It's not, it's like a different world down there, man. The money spends different. So when you're out on but you're not out on a yacht in Tuscaloosa. I don't know. Don't they ruin it? Say it. The South ruins everything. Pontoon boat.
Yeah.
By 10 pontoon boats. Freaking South. All right, let's move on before I get even more angry. This is the one we talked about earlier. It's a guy who left and now is coming back to his old school, and it's Amorion Walker at Michigan.
Yeah.
And this could be their Josh Wallace, because they have Will Johnson, who at corner, who is probably the best corner in the country, projected as a top 10 NFL draft pick in a lot of early 2025 drafts. And just like a year ago, I don't know that Michigan for sure has an idea of who their number 2 corner, their second starting corner, is going to be. And DJ Waller was a guy who seemed to be in that competition in the spring, and he transferred. He went in the portal and he transferred to Kentucky. And so Walker, coming back from Ole Miss after just spring football at Ole Miss, he's played corner and receiver at Michigan. And one of the other things Michigan said after spring ball is we need to add some depth at receiver. So this guy has a chance to help them either way on offense or defense, although it maybe seems like the greater need is at cornerback potentially. I think, Frederick Moore and some other guys popped a little bit in the spring game. I think Michigan at least has 3 or 4 receivers they believe in, but this could actually matter for Michigan, right?
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I'll be curious where he actually ends up. I did see Sam Webb at 24/7 when he tweeted that Walker was coming back, did refer to him as a receiver. So I don't know. That doesn't necessarily mean any kind of decision has been made. I think part of the reason Walker left in the first place is because maybe he felt like he was not going to be the number 2 corner based off like some other developments with other guys in the secondary. So, but yeah, Michigan needs help on either side, and like if it ends up being receiver, like he's an explosive athlete who can give them some big play potential, which I think they clearly need at that position too. Like kind of like the guys capable, I think, of giving you a big play reliably on the offense right now are kind of just Colston Loveland and Donovan Edwards. So maybe Walker can do that for him too, but or maybe I don't know. Let him do the Travis Hunter thing and play both ways for all I care. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do that if you can?
So Michigan's, they've lost a couple linebackers in the portal and that kind of thing. But this is a good win for Sharon Moore to go back to an explosive athlete who left for the SEC and say, "Hey man, you're our guy. Come back." That's a pretty good one, I think.
Yeah, it's a nice endorsement, I think, of what Sharon Moore is doing for a guy to want to come back.
Yeah, and also, Michigan, as we said, looked pretty decent in the spring game. I don't think they need a huge number of reinforcements, but a guy like this has a chance to make an impact. And again, they've been the hallmark of the end of the Jim Harbaugh era. Like obviously the success, but like why did they succeed? I mean, it's two main things, right? Which is developing high level, but maybe not 5-star recruits, but maximize like really good development of good players. Not crazy development of average players, but again, they're not recruiting at the same level as Alabama, Georgia, or Ohio State, but they're producing players at that same level. So that's number one. And then very smart, targeted transfer guys. Bang, bang, bang. We need a tackle. Let's get a tackle, right? We need a corner. Let's get Josh Wallace. And this would fit that. This is both potentially. You're developing a good player, and you're also getting him back in the transfer portal. This could be the combination of the best of the Harbaugh era.
I don't think you get the double dip there. I don't think you get credit for both.
No, credit for both. That's why you do it. It's a new strategy. And it's like it's infiltration. What if Michigan plays Ole Miss in the playoff? And Walker's like, "Hey, I was there for the spring. This is what they do." Yeah. Lane Kiffin whispered this to me on the sideline one time. It's their secret for success. Right. This one's for you, brother. We're going to talk punting and Cincinnati. Cincinnati has a punter, Mason Fletcher, who was like an All-American candidate last year. He's from Australia. He's awesome. He has a younger brother named Max Fletcher, who was second team All-SEC at Arkansas last year. And Max is transferring to Cincinnati, and he is going to redshirt behind his brother this year. And then he will have 2 years of being the Cincinnati punter. So this is, did you watch that romantic comedy with Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell?
I did not. No.
Come on. I saw that in the theater. It's on Netflix now. You should watch it. It's all, they go to a wedding, but the wedding's in Australia. And this is the punting version of that because it's set in Australia and it's a beautiful story of love. And it's two punting brothers at Cincinnati. And you would watch this movie.
I would absolutely watch this movie. The only thing I love more than an Aussie punter is two Aussie punters. So this is great to have Aussie punting brothers. Also, while we're on the subject, Notre Dame added itself an Aussie punter the other day as well, who might be one of the top 10 most handsome men to ever play college football.
Wow.
He looks like a superhero.
If college football in the NIL world, and by college football, I mean us, if we put this down. The Kings of the North, handsome Northern punters calendar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'd buy it. That'd be great. Then we can sell it for charity. It'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be a lot of guys in fur vests and Viking helmets, but with their abs out.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Punters have abs, don't they?
Yeah, some of them do. The kid that Ohio State signed too, Nick McClarty, he's like 6'7", 250 pounds. He looks like he should be playing defensive end.
We're going to have too many. There's only 12 months. There's 26 Northern punters. There's going to be a fight to get in this calendar. But actually, there's only 11 months available because you and I are December. Come on.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe not abs.
It's me, you, and Cam Johnston, former Ohio State punter, are December.
Our favorite player that we have. And he'd do it. Let's get him on. All right. So just a wonderful story. Oh, like, great.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what you need to have? Good punter. You know what a good punter can do? Win you games. So
That's
good
right.
job by Cincinnati
Yeah.
of doubling down on the Fletcher family. All right. Ninth up for our discussion of what's going on in the North is Fran Brown and Syracuse, like adding, just still getting after it. And the two main guys to talk about, and I think we've mentioned him on our show before, is Justice Ross Simmons, the receiver from Colorado State. This was not like just in the last couple days, but he's a guy who everybody was interested in. More than 700 receiving yards last year at Colorado State. I think he canceled a visit to Florida after he had visited Syracuse and decided that that's where I'm going to go. And then Savion Washington, the right tackle from Colorado. And we know Colorado completely redid its offensive line, but wasn't he the best of a bad offensive line at Colorado last year? Is that fair to say or no?
Yeah, but I also don't know that he should be playing at the power forward level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that ruined it. Okay, skip Syracuse then. I was all excited. I got Savion Washington. I it's a place to be, right? You're adding people from programs, and you're in the mix, and they're doubling that. Like, again, just to add Justice Ross Simmons, and we did talk about him. I think to add that to this passing attack with the potential they have with Kyle McCord, I just continue to like how Syracuse and Fran Brown are going about it.
Yeah, it's good to add a pass catcher, I think, for Kyle McCord. I was half wondering if Kyle McCord might try to whisper into the ear of any of Ohio State's receivers. But Ohio State did lose a receiver. Keon Gray's left, who's going into his third year. Whether or not
he could whisper to him, he hasn't landed somewhere yet, right?
I don't know. Yeah, but like, otherwise, I am unaware of that happening. But I thought maybe there was a small percentage chance that some movement from Ohio State's receiver into Syracuse could happen, only because of the familiarity with Kyle McCord.
Yeah, that would be interesting. So I don't know. We just you still like Syracuse? How they're going around, getting after it?
I'm being cautiously optimistic. I'm not being national championship or bust mode like you.
Okay. Last one, we just sort of want to for the 10th topic here, just like make sure we hit on some of the things that happens a little earlier in the portal that matter. Like Deion Hayes was one of those things, right? We covered him. Mm-hmm. Keandre Lambert-Smith from Penn State to Auburn. In the end, he was Penn State's number one receiver in a kind of dysfunctional passing attack last year. The discussion around Penn State has been like they need to upgrade their receiver room. And so they brought in Julian Fleming. I think they feel better about some of the things happening in their receiver room, but they also lost their number one receiver from last year. I don't know that we've covered how big of a loss do you think this is? Is it maybe just one of those situations where both sides needed to turn the page, or did this blow a hole in Penn State's playoff plans to not have him?
That's a good question. I probably am more inclined to the latter. Right? I just don't think Penn State is in the business of losing like potentially good receivers. Right? They've been a little deficient at that position for a couple of years, and like Lambert Smith like has not been awesome, but was clearly the best of what they had. And as someone who watched a lot of Julian Fleming's career, like I think I'd rather have Keandre Lambert Smith than Julian Fleming. So like I think it could end up being a big deal for Penn State to not have him, or it just puts a ton of pressure on like everybody else to step up, right? Yeah. And they need to be much better than they were a year ago. So I don't. It wasn't a loss that I just sort of like shrugged off as like, oh well, like this, to me that felt like a big deal for Penn State.
Okay, Cormani McClain, former 5-star who Deion had flipped to get him to Colorado. He's in the portal. He also is still one of the big prizes, I think, still out there, and we just again have to acknowledge that was one that got very sideways at Colorado, but seemingly is a pretty talented player, and it would be nice to see him in the North.
Yeah, it would be. I think like he might be someone who's like gotten like written off a little bit because like he just didn't play, and like clearly there were some disconnects at Colorado, but like he was by some regard like the best cornerback prospect in his recruiting class. So like certainly a guy worth taking a flyer on, and probably a guy too is like pretty eager to like kind of like rewrite what people think about him. So I think you're going to be getting like a different version of Cormani McClain. So we'll see. But I mean, he's from Florida, so he'll probably end up in Florida.
And then Damian Martinez, who we've discussed, we loved him last year at Oregon State. wound up at Miami. Miami's going nuts in the portal, but it's just, it would have been great. David Martinez, just like Aiden Childs, follows Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. Would have been great. Didn't happen. We just don't have a Northern story in the portal. I think the way like Miami has gone nuts in the portal, the way Ole Miss, probably more in the first portal window, has really gotten after it. And do you think that will continue to be the case, that as much as Northern teams need to be smart and strategic and aggressive, that there's always going to be bigger portal stories in the South because the donors are done?
The donors are dumber. Yeah.
Whatever. I don't know.
Probably, but I mean, like Colorado's there. Although I don't think like Colorado's throwing around a ton of cash, right? I just think it's Dion. Not to say they're not throwing. They're clearly throwing around some cash, but I think it's mostly Dion. I don't know. I'll be interested to see what like the next offseason looks like for Michigan State. Like clearly a program that was comfortable loading up on transfers and with Mel Tucker there, and Jonathan Smith needs to turn that roster over. So I could see them being pretty active. Not now. I think they sort of have to tread water now, but like next offseason, I could see them getting after it. I don't know. A lot of the programs in the North, I think, might struggle to operate that way if they decided to. But I think there's a small handful that could. Colorado, Michigan State, like Ohio State. This was Ohio State's version of getting after it. Was not like bringing in 13 guys, but bringing in 6 guys who are pretty high profile. So like I think that could continue. But no, I don't know that we'll see like teams regularly operating the way that the Miamis and like I don't know who else Ole Miss does. You know?
Yeah. All right. That's our portal wrap. Obviously, as final portal decisions are made for guys who are in but haven't decided a new destination, we'll certainly continue to talk about that on Kings of the North. But we wanted to be a little holistic with this discussion and not just be a little bit here, a little bit there. And we didn't want to do necessarily rankings, Landis. I know you can do, because it really, I think, if you just do a list of here's the number of players every team in the North lost, here's the number of players every team in the North added, I think you can give the wrong impression. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
If it's just numbers?
I think you can give the wrong impression if it's just numbers. The one thing maybe I would like to do at some point when like really all the dust settles, so maybe this is like later in May, maybe we can do like a draft of all the transfers of like who we think is going to be the most impactful player.
From the whole cycle.
From the whole cycle, yeah.
From Evan Stewart at Oregon and who's the linebacker that went from Maryland to Michigan?
Jayshon Barham, Riley Leonard,
Caleb Downs,
Kyle
McCord.
Yeah.
Oh, we just like outlined like the first 10 picks. Yeah, we'll do that.
Yeah.
We'll do that. Okay. For now, we always appreciate our producer Mike Yorostowski for making us look good and sound good. One more round of spring game / spring practice react. The last Northern spring game is Washington this weekend, as we said. But we haven't talked about BYU because they got away from us. They just did their spring game in March. We haven't talked about Northwestern, Wisconsin, or Minnesota for spring practice because they didn't have official spring games. So we would like to at least touch on those. And then we'll be into our cycle of off-season things, sort of state of the program, which way are programs headed, ranking things in the North. That will be the era that we're into in May and June and early July before we get to late July. And we plan to be at some conference media days and talking with people. And then we'll be 5 days a week getting ready for the season. So tell a friend. Our friends at the College Football Inquirer, Dan Wetzel and those fellas, they did a thing on social media the other day where Dan said somebody gave him a good suggestion, and Dan put up 4 photos of things that were discussed on the show that day, just as a tease. And one of them was like a Wile E. Coyote photo, and it makes you think, I wonder what the Wile E. Coyote discussion was. So I spent 10 minutes looking for an appropriate photo of a shirtless Warren Sapp to promote our last show, and I couldn't quite nail it, so I didn't do it for us.
You can do it with this episode.
Yeah.
You
But I
can
also
do,
still
like,
might include a shirtless Warren Sapp.
well, yeah, it's always nice to spice things up that way. But you can do like a couple of the players you talked about, and then like Koala for the Australian
Yeah.
punters calendar. Yeah.
I actually used to do Glenn Powell and his butt. There's a lot of Glenn Powell's butt in that movie. So if you decide to watch it with your family and your baby, just be aware.
That's
This ain't
good
no
to know. I
Disney.
appreciate that.
This ain't
Yeah.
no Disneyland movie, baby.
It was available when I was on vacation last week. It was available to watch on the plane, and I thought to myself, "There's potentially some butt in this, and I don't want to watch it on an airplane."
What a responsible human being you have become in parenthood. 28-year-old Bill Landis is firing that up.
Yeah, that's probably true.
28-year-old Bill Landis is all about plain butt. Fatherhood, Bill Landis says no.
That's right.
All right. Thanks to you guys, as always, for making us part of your college football experience. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.